Owners often tell me about it with a laugh. Their cat drinks from the tap, waits for someone to turn the water on, and ignores the full water bowl sitting right beside it. They think it's just a funny habit. I know it's usually a sign of something far more important: chronic dehydration. After 20 years as a veterinarian, I've seen the same pattern again and again. Cats that eat mostly dry food often live in a constant moisture deficit. Over time, their kidneys and urinary tract pay the price. The good news is that there are foods you can add to your cat's bowl today that help increase water intake naturally. Some cost almost nothing. Some are probably already in your kitchen. And every one of them works for a specific biological reason. Let's start with the one that matters most. A cat is a desert animal by origin. Its ancestors hunted in arid regions and got water primarily from the bodies of prey. And the body of a mouse or bird contains roughly 70% moisture. That is the natural hydration standard for a cat. Now look at a dry kibble. It contains 6 to 10% moisture. The difference is tenfold. Cats are not evolutionarily wired to drink from a bowl to compensate for that deficit. Their thirst drive is weakly developed as a signal. They simply don't drink enough. And that deficit accumulates over months and years. What this means clinically. A study published in the Journal of Animal Science in 2026 found that cats on exclusively dry diets had a 2.64 times higher risk of developing lower urinary tract disease compared to cats receiving mixed feeding. Earlier data gives even sharper figures. The risk of urethral obstruction on a dry diet versus wet is 15 times higher. For male cats, whose urethra is narrower, this can be fatal. Researchers at Waltham established a specific threshold. The protective effect for the urinary tract begins when food contains at least 53% moisture. Most quality wet foods deliver 70 to 80%. I understand that someone reading this is thinking, my cat has been on dry food for 8 years and everything is fine. That sounds like a counter-argument, and I hear it, but fine doesn't mean optimal. Kidney disease in cats often produces no symptoms until more than 70% of function has already been lost. If switching to wet food entirely isn't possible, start small. Add 1 or 2 tablespoons of warm water or a cat-safe broth without onion or garlic to the dry bowl. That alone shifts the balance in the right direction. If you can add even 1 wet feeding a day, do it. The difference is real. One more thing worth knowing in advance. Cats raised exclusively on dry food from kittenhood often refuse wet food as adults, simply because they don't recognize it as food. Feeding behavior is established early. If you have a kitten right now, this is the best moment to start. Now for fatty acids. And here is something most owners don't know, and it's fundamentally important. The human body can convert plant-based omega-3s, from flaxseed, for example, into the EPA and DHA that cells need. A cat's body cannot. Cats have extremely low activity of the enzyme responsible for that conversion. So plant-based omega-3s are essentially useless for them. They need ready-made EPA and DHA from marine sources. EPA and DHA are broad-spectrum anti-inflammatory agents. They act at the level of cell membranes, reducing the synthesis of molecules that trigger the inflammatory response. In practical terms, this means less chronic inflammation in the joints of arthritic cats, better skin condition and coat quality, and, especially important, lower load on the kidneys. I'll say it plainly, kidney disease is one of the most common diagnoses in cats over 10 years old, and omega-3s matter here. Studies show that cats with renal insufficiency who received fish oil had lower levels of inflammation, and some markers of kidney function improved within a month. This is not a cure and not a substitute for treatment, but it's no accident that most renal diets for cats today contain EPA and DHA. Veterinary science incorporated that long ago. The simplest source, sardines in water. No salt, no oil, no seasoning. Small fish accumulate far less mercury than large predators like tuna. Half a small sardine 2 or 3 times a week on top of the regular food is enough. This is a supplement, not a meal replacement. One important caution here. Canned tuna for humans is a common mistake. It contains too much unsaturated fat and far too little vitamin E. With regular tuna feeding, cats develop steatitis, a painful inflammation of fat tissue. Sardines in water are the safe alternative. For those who want more precise dosage control, fish oil capsules for cats are widely available on Amazon. Look for products that specify EPA and DHA and follow the manufacturer's instructions. Dosages for cats and dogs differ and cannot be extrapolated between species. But omega-3s are only one part of the equation. There's one more thing most owners overlook, and it goes to the very foundation of feline nutrition. A cat is an obligate carnivore. This means certain nutrients cannot be synthesized by the cat's body. They must come exclusively from animal protein. One of those nutrients is taurine. Taurine is an amino acid found only in meat. Taurine deficiency in cats leads to two specific consequences: retinal degeneration and dilated cardiomyopathy, enlargement of the heart muscle that ultimately leads to heart failure. Before the 1980s, when veterinary science didn't yet understand the role of taurine, dilated cardiomyopathy was a common diagnosis in domestic cats. Every quality commercial cat food today contains taurine, but the problem arises when owners give cats large amounts of human food that isn't formulated for cats while reducing the main diet. Cooked chicken without additives is a safe way to increase animal protein intake. Now for muscle. According to Purina Institute data, after age 12, a cat's body begins absorbing protein from food less efficiently. The requirement for protein doesn't decrease. It increases. In veterinary nutrition, this is called sarcopenia, age-related loss of muscle mass. Cats whose muscle mass declines lose mobility faster, tolerate anesthesia worse, and recover more slowly from illness and surgery. Cats that enter old age with strong muscle reserves have significantly better prognosis across all of those parameters. Muscle mass is built over years of proper nutrition, which is why chicken, as a regular topper, matters not only for older cats, it matters for young cats who will one day be old. Preparation is simple. Simmer or poach chicken breast without skin in clean water. No salt, no spices, and no broth that might contain onion or garlic. 2 tablespoons of finely shredded meat on top of the regular food is sufficient. Raw meat is not appropriate. It carries real risk of salmonella and E. coli. For the cat and for the people in the home who touch its bowl and the counter. Next, the most budget-friendly and least obvious item on the list. But it has a real mechanism of action. Canned pumpkin puree contains 2 types of fiber simultaneously, soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber absorbs excess water in the intestine and thickens the contents. This helps with diarrhea. Insoluble fiber adds bulk and stimulates intestinal wall movement. This helps with constipation. Canned pumpkin puree also contains about 90% moisture, quietly adding hydration with every spoonful. There's an additional effect owners rarely think about until it becomes a problem. Pumpkin fiber helps move hair through the digestive tract. Cats that frequently regurgitate hairballs sometimes respond well to regular small additions of pumpkin puree. The hair simply passes through rather than forming a blockage. Veterinarians recommend it for cats with mild short-term stool issues or frequent hairballs. The recommended amount is half a teaspoon per day, stirred into the regular food. Results are usually noticeable within 12 to 24 hours. Now, the single most important warning in this section: there is a significant difference between plain canned pumpkin and pumpkin pie filling. These are 2 different products with different ingredients. Pie filling is a spice blend: nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves. Nutmeg is toxic to cats. It can cause disorientation, seizures, and cardiac problems. Check the label. The ingredient list should be one word: pumpkin. Nothing else. One more note. Pumpkin puree addresses a symptom, not the cause. If a cat has chronic stool problems or diarrhea lasting more than 24 hours, that calls for a veterinary examination, not an increased dose of pumpkin. Some cats simply don't drink water from a bowl, even with multiple bowls, even with a fountain. They ignore them and drink at a minimum. For these cats, bone broth often succeeds where water fails. It's aromatic, Most cats readily lap it up, and fluid enters the body without any coaxing. There is an additional effect. The collagen and amino acids released during bone cooking theoretically support joints. But I'll be honest, there are few clinical studies specifically on cats here. Hydration is what works with certainty. Joints, logical, but not proven. Now the most important part of this section, what I'm asking you to remember separately. Human chicken broth is not safe for cats. Almost every broth in a supermarket contains onion or garlic, or both. Garlic is 5 times more toxic than onion per unit of weight. It destroys red blood cells and leads to hemolytic anemia. The toxic effect is cumulative. Small amounts of garlic powder received regularly produce very concrete clinical consequences over time. What makes it especially dangerous is that symptoms, weakness, pale gums, dark or orange urine, rapid pulse, can appear several days after consumption. Owners don't always connect this to the broth they gave once, in small amounts. The safe alternative is a cat-specific broth without onion, garlic, or salt. On Amazon, Instinct Bone Broth, Open Farm, and Solid Gold are made specifically for cats. Or a homemade version, plain chicken or beef bones, water, nothing from the allium family, no salt. Before serving, skim the fat, strain it, and let it cool to room temperature. The last item on today's list, shorter than the others, but worth clarifying because the question comes up often. Blueberries are safe for cats. This is important to say because grapes and raisins are not, and owners sometimes have confusion about berries generally. But I have to be precise. There are almost no specific clinical studies on the benefits of blueberries for cats. What we know is that antioxidants in berries theoretically reduce oxidative stress, and a similar effect in cats from antioxidant-rich diets has been documented. But cats are obligate carnivores. Their bodies obtain antioxidants most efficiently from animal sources, taurine, vitamin E, omega-3s. If your cat has shown interest in blueberries, offer 2 or 3, washed and cut in half. It's a safe, low-sugar treat. But don't expect a therapeutic effect, and don't offer them to a cat that's indifferent. Most cats simply don't respond to sweet taste, because they lack sweet taste receptors. Before moving to the summary, 2 supplements worth mentioning separately from foods because they have genuine clinical support. The first, fish oil capsules. If sardines aren't practical, because of smell, taste, or logistics, cat-specific fish oil delivers the same EPA and DHA at a precise dose. Look for a product where EPA and DHA are listed separately on the label, not simply fish oil. Dosing for cats and dogs differs. The second, Purina Fortiflora Probiotic. This is the only cat probiotic with a clinically verified strain, Enterococcus faecium, F68, studied in cats at UC Davis. It's appropriate after a course of antibiotics or for mild recurring stool issues. But a probiotic does not replace veterinary diagnosis for chronic symptoms. A 9-year Purina study conducted on 90 cats showed that a diet enriched with antioxidants, omega-3 fatty acids, and a prebiotic extended healthy lifespan by an average of 1 year. 1 year sounds modest, but convert it to cat years and factor in the quality of that time. It's meaningful. None of the foods I've discussed today are medicine. They don't replace a veterinary examination, diagnostics, or prescribed treatment. But they do what good preventive care does: reduce the load on organs before the problem has developed. One action for today: specific and simple. If your cat eats only dry kibble, add 2 tablespoons of warm water or a safe cat broth to the bowl. Do it right now after this video. Next steps: gradually, without upheaval. Sudden diet changes in cats frequently cause food refusal or digestive upset. 1 change per week is the right pace. Add 1 or 2 wet feedings per week and maintain that rhythm for 2 weeks before moving forward. Then half a small sardine in water once a week as a topper. Keep an open can of plain pumpkin in the fridge, not pie filling, for when something goes wrong with the stool. It keeps for a few days after opening. And the last formula worth remembering: meat plus moisture, starting young. That is the cheapest veterinary prevention you can afford.